The oxygen gauge on my suit blinked red, and I had maybe 6 minutes left to live. My name is Daniel Ford, and 3 hours ago, I was running cargo through the Halden Belt with nothing but static on the comms and a full tank of air. Now I was pinned under a collapsed support beam in the broken spine of my own ship, blood freezing at the edges of a cracked visor, watching the numbers count down toward 0. The attack had come out of nowhere. Raiders, unmarked, fast. They hit my hauler broadside, tore through the hull like paper, and vanished before I even got a good look at their ship. I never found out what they wanted. Maybe they didn't want anything. Maybe out here, in the dead space between trade lanes, some people just like to break things. I pushed against the beam with what strength I had left. It didn't move. My arm was pinned, my leg was numb, and the cold was crawling up through my spine like it wanted to introduce itself. That was when the light hit my face. A shape moved through the wreckage above me, careful, deliberate, stepping over twisted metal, like she had done it 100 times before. Tall, pale blue skin that seemed to catch the emergency lighting and throw it back sharper. Silver eyes, narrow and alert, scanning the debris field the way a soldier scans a battlefield. An alien, a real one, standing in the middle of my dying ship. She crouched near me, close enough that I could see the fine lines of some kind of technology woven into the collar of her suit. Her hand hovered over a device on her wrist, and for one terrible second, I thought she was deciding whether I was worth saving. Then she spoke, and her voice was clipped, cold, and impossibly clear even through the thin air between us. "Don't touch me, human." I hadn't reached for her. I hadn't even lifted my hand, but she said it like a warning carved out of old scars, like the words had been waiting behind her teeth for a long time. "Wasn't planning to," I managed, my voice raw. "Little busy dying here." Something flickered across her face. Not sympathy, calculation. She reached down, gripped the edge of the beam, and with strength that didn't match her lean frame, she heaved it aside like it weighed nothing. My arm came free, and pain roared up through my shoulder so bright I nearly blacked out. "You will not touch me," she said again, hauling me up by the back of my suit instead of my hands, keeping every inch of distance she could manage. "You will not speak unless spoken to. You will follow every instruction exactly. Do you understand these terms?" Do I have a choice? No. At least she was honest. She dragged me through the wreckage toward an airlock I hadn't even noticed. A small craft docked against the ruined hull of my ship, sleek and dark, built for speed rather than comfort. The moment we passed through the airlock and the pressure equalized, she ripped my helmet off herself, her gloved fingers never once brushing my skin, and shoved a breathing mask over my face instead. Clean air, real air. I gasped it down like it was the finest thing I had ever tasted. "Why?" I said between breaths. "Are you helping me?" "I am not helping you." She turned away, already moving toward the cockpit. "I am fulfilling an obligation. There is a difference." I didn't know what that meant yet, but I was in no position to argue with the woman who had just saved my life while telling me not to touch her. Her ship was small, efficient, humming with a kind of quiet power I had never felt on a human vessel. She strapped me into a seat at the back, wrapped a thin silver blanket around my shoulders, without once making contact, and moved to the pilot's chair like I wasn't even there anymore. "What's your name?" I asked. Silence. "Mine's Daniel. Daniel Ford." I did not ask. No, but it felt weird not saying it. She glanced back at me, just once, her silver eyes narrowing like she was trying to solve a puzzle she didn't want to be given. "Vathara," she said finally, like the word cost her something. "You will not use it unless necessary." "Vathara," I repeated anyway, just to see her jaw tighten. It was petty, but it was also the first time since the attack that I felt like a person instead of cargo. The ship pulled away from the wreck of my hauler, and I watched through the small viewport as everything I owned drifted into the dark behind us, swallowed by silence. For a long while, neither of us spoke. I studied her instead, the careful way she moved, the distance she kept from every surface I had touched, the way her eyes kept flicking to a small holo display that tracked something I couldn't read. She wasn't just cautious, she was afraid of me. "Can I ask you something?" I said eventually. "No." "Why do you hate humans so much?" She didn't answer right away. Her hands moved across the controls with sharp, practiced motions, and when she finally spoke, her voice had lost some of its ice, replaced by something harder to name. "I do not hate humans," she said. "I am careful around them. There is a difference, human, though I doubt your kind understands it. Try me. Your species is known across every system I have traveled. Violent. Unpredictable. A people who solve every disagreement with their fists and call it strength." She spared me a glance, sharp as a blade. "I have read the reports. I have seen the aftermath. I do not need a lecture from the very thing I am warning myself against." I sat with that for a moment, the accusation settling heavy in my chest. It wasn't entirely wrong, and it wasn't entirely right either, and there was no easy way to untangle 300 years of history into a sentence she'd actually believe. "Fine," I said instead. "Then why save me at all?" Her jaw tightened again. "Because leaving you to die when I was capable of preventing it would violate the code I live by, not because of who you are, despite it." It stung more than I expected. But it was also, I realized slowly, the most honest thing anyone had said to me in years. The first real danger came 4 hours later. An alarm cut through the quiet cabin, sharp and insistent, and Vathara's whole body went rigid in her seat. She pulled up a display showing 3 ships closing fast from behind, their hull markings scorched and mismatched, clearly built from stolen parts. "Raiders," she said, more to herself than to me. "The same signature that struck your vessel." "They're still out here?" "They are hunting the wreck for salvage. We are simply in their path now." Her hands flew across the controls, and the ship banked hard, throwing me against the restraints. "Sit still and remain silent. I can outrun them." For a while, it looked like she could. Her ship was fast, faster than anything I had flown, weaving through debris fields and gravity shadows with a precision that made my stomach flip. But the raiders had numbers, and slowly, methodically, they began closing the gap. "They are gaining," Vathara said, and for the first time, I heard something crack in her calm. "This vessel was not built for combat. Do you have any weapons at all?" "Minimal defensive systems. Enough to discourage, not enough to fight 3 ships." I unbuckled myself before I fully thought it through, moving toward the front of the cabin. She turned, sharp and immediate, one hand raised like she expected me to lunge at her. "Sit down," she snapped. "I'm not going to touch you," I said, raising both hands slowly. "I used to fly cargo runs through belts worse than this. I know evasive patterns these ships won't expect." "Let me help." "Absolutely not. They're going to catch us in less than 10 minutes at this rate. I read your display too, even upside down." Her eyes flicked to the console, then back to me, and I watched her weigh pride against survival in real time. It wasn't a long fight. "Do not touch the controls," she said finally. "Tell me what to input, nothing more." It was enough. I talked her through a spiral pattern I'd learned years ago, a trick smugglers use to shake pursuers in dense fields, cutting thrust at odd intervals to throw off targeting locks. Vathara executed it flawlessly, her hands steady even as sweat gathered at her temple, and slowly, one by one, the raider ships began falling behind, confused by the erratic movement. "They are losing our trail," she said, disbelief coloring her voice. "Told you I wasn't completely useless." She didn't answer, but she didn't argue either, and for a woman who apparently measured every word like currency, that felt like something close to gratitude. We lost the raiders completely an hour later, slipping into a quiet current between 2 dead moons where their scanners couldn't follow. Vathara finally let the ship drift, her shoulders sagging with the release of tension she had been holding since the alarm first sounded. "You flew well," I said quietly. "You gave good instruction." She paused, then added, almost reluctantly, "For a human." High praise. The ghost of something crossed her face, not quite a smile, but close. It was during the quiet after that she finally told me why she carried so much caution around people like me. She had lost someone once, years ago, to a human raider crew that had attacked a trading outpost her family managed on the edge of a border system. Not a war, not a battle, just senseless violence from people looking for easy targets. And her brother had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. She had been young. She had never forgotten the sound of the alarms, or the silence that came after. "I do not tell you this for sympathy," she said, staring at some fixed point beyond the viewport. "I tell you so you understand. My caution is not cruelty, it is memory." "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it completely. "That happened to you? That should never have happened to you. It is done. It cannot be undone by apology." "No," I agreed, "but it can still matter that I'm sorry." She looked at me then, really looked, like she was seeing something she hadn't expected to find. I didn't push further. Some wounds needed room, not questions. 2 days into the journey home, we picked up a distress signal from a small transport drifting without power, its systems dark, its crew trapped inside a cabin slowly losing heat. Vathara hesitated at the console, torn between the urgency of getting me back to a safe port and the pull of an obligation she clearly couldn't ignore. "We should help them," I said. "It is a delay, and a risk. We do not know who or what is aboard." "You didn't know what I was either. You helped anyway." She exhaled slowly, something between frustration and resignation, and adjusted our course toward the signal. The transport belonged to a small family of travelers, from a species I didn't recognize. Their heating systems failed, their youngest member sick from the cold. Vathara worked fast, transferring power cells, running diagnostics, her hands moving with practiced skill, while I helped carry supplies between the ships, careful never to overstep the boundaries she had set. At one point, the youngest of the travelers, a small trembling child wrapped in blankets too thin for the cold, reached toward me with a shaking hand. Without thinking, I pulled the emergency ration bar from my own pocket, the last one Vathara had given me, and pressed it gently into the child's grip. Vathara watched from across the cabin, saying nothing, her expression unreadable. But later, back on our own ship, after the family's systems had been restored and we pulled away, she spoke without looking at me. "You gave away your food. They needed it more. You had little enough to spare yourself." Didn't feel like a choice, honestly. Felt like the only thing to do. She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing an idle pattern along the edge of the console. "The reports I have read," she said slowly, "do not describe humans this way. Reports rarely tell the whole story, about anyone." She didn't respond, but she didn't dismiss it either, and I noticed, for the first time, that the distance she kept between us in the cabin had shrunk, just slightly, just enough to matter. The real test came on the final stretch of the journey, close enough to her home system that I could see its star glowing steady and warm through the viewport. That was when the raiders found us again. Not the same 3 ships. More this time, faster, better armed, clearly having tracked some trace of our earlier escape. Vathara's console lit up with warnings, and her calm cracked entirely for the first time since I'd met her. "They have weapons capable of breaching this hull," she said, voice tight. "We cannot outrun them in open space." "Then we don't run. We use the field." I pointed toward a dense asteroid cluster on the edge of the display, remnants of some old collision drifting in slow, tangled orbits. Ships like theirs, built for raw speed, they can't maneuver tight in debris. We can. It is dangerous. Less dangerous than getting caught in the open. She didn't hesitate this time. She trusted the read faster than before, angling the ship hard toward the cluster, while I called out gaps and openings, watching the shifting rocks with the kind of focus that blocked out everything else, fear included. The raiders followed, reckless, firing wide shots that shattered stone instead of hull. Vathara wove through the field with startling grace, and I kept calling turns, my voice steady even as my heart slammed against my ribs. One shot came too close, clipping the edge of the ship and sending us spinning hard to the side. Vathara was thrown from her seat, restraints failing, and she slammed against the console, stunned. The ship kept spinning, alarms screaming, heading straight for a jagged outcrop of rock. I didn't think. I moved. I grabbed the controls, my hands finally on the console instead of just my voice, and pulled the ship level with every ounce of instinct I had left from years of flying cargo through worse odds than this. The rock passed close enough to scrape paint from the hull, but we cleared it, the ship stabilizing just as the last of the raider vessels lost our trail in the debris, giving up the chase entirely. Silence settled over the cabin, broken only by the low hum of the engines and Vathara's ragged breathing beside me. I turned to check on her, my hand instinctively reaching toward her shoulder, before I caught myself and pulled back, remembering the rule she'd set from the very first moment we met. She didn't flinch away this time. She looked at my hand, hovering just short of her, and then up at my face, something unreadable moving behind her silver eyes. "You could have let me fall," she said quietly. "You could have taken the controls sooner, saved yourself the risk." "Wasn't really an option." "Why not?" "Because you saved me first. Because you've been saving strangers this whole trip while telling yourself you don't care. Because somewhere back there, I stopped thinking of you as someone I needed to survive and started thinking of you as someone I didn't want to lose." She didn't answer right away. She sat up slowly, steadying herself, and for a long moment simply studied me in a way that felt more open than anything since we'd met. "You are not what the reports described," she said finally. "Maybe the reports need updating." The rest of the journey passed in a quiet that felt different from before, comfortable instead of guarded, filled with small conversations about nothing important and everything that mattered. She told me about her home, a coastal city built along cliffs that caught the light of 2 moons at once. I told her about growing up on a station where the stars were the only constant in a life that moved too fast to hold on to anything else. When we finally reached her home system, I expected her to drop me at some neutral station, some transfer point where our paths would split for good. Instead, she guided the ship down through the atmosphere of her homeworld, toward the very cliffs she had described, toward a small house, built from pale stone, that looked like it had been standing there for 100 years. "This is your home," I said, watching the view through the windshield. "Yes. Why bring me here?" She powered down the engines, and for a moment, she didn't answer, her hands resting still on the console, like she was gathering courage for something bigger than any raider chase we'd survived together. "Because," she said slowly, "you are someone I trust enough to bring home. That is not a small thing, for someone like me." She stood, moved toward the airlock, and paused at the threshold, turning back to face me fully for the first time, without an ounce of the guarded distance she had carried since the moment we met. "Daniel," she said, and hearing my name in her voice felt like something shifting quietly into place. "Yeah?" She crossed the space between us, slow and deliberate, and reached out, her fingers closing gently around my hand, skin against skin, no gloves, no distance, no warning this time. "You may touch me now," she said softly, "if you wish." I laced my fingers through hers, steady and sure, and for the first time since the wreck, since the cold, since the words that had started everything between us, I felt something settle deep in my chest that felt a lot like home. Outside, the twin moons rose slowly over the cliffs, casting silver light across the water, and standing there with her hand in mine, I understood that sometimes the most dangerous journeys end up leading you exactly where you were always meant to be.